ride policy. Why would you not want Attorney Acosta to go to work when so many other workers who are not vaccinated are encouraged to go to work?
Well, because PAO Chief Acosta is precisely a chief of office. She is a high-ranking official. She is an undersecretary. People look up to him, to her, for example, of how a government official should behave. And if she says, I don't want to be vaccinated for various reasons, fine. That will be respected. But the government, in the exercise of its police power, has the right to protect her co-workers, the community in general, by barring her from going to work unless she gets vaccinated. And this is a reasonable mandate to protect public health. And in this particular case, I repeat, PAO Chief Acosta is a high government official who must follow government regulation. Otherwise, the campaign of the Philippines, of the government, to have people vaccinated will suffer from credibility issues. Because if a high government official does not follow government mandate, how do you propose that Karen Davila will follow it? So this.
But is there a government mandate that all government workers should be vaccinated? Because that's already mandatory vaccination for certain sectors. And in the United States, federal workers other countries are also mandating that government workers healthcare workers must be vaccinated. But in the Philippines, I have not yet heard the president explicitly order that all government workers must be vaccinated.
Well, it's a issue which is not even settled in jurisdictions like the United States. From what I read, the mandate for the vaccine mandates for the private sector has been sustained by the equal employment opportunity. But insofar as the public is concerned, there is so much debate. But just focusing on Acosta, because she is a high government official.
That's the question. Because there are other government officials for sure or other government workers who may not be vaccinated and who may not be as high profile as her. But does that mean they should be barred from going to work?
They should. Well, yes, they should be barred physically because they can render work through the telecommunication facilities, through Zoom, which is what we're doing now. In other words, let us not forget that today we face a pandemic. And it is the duty of the state to protect its citizens. And the credibility of the government is an important and critical consideration to make people follow the rules and not needing a mandate. In fact, if you set the good example, then as a leader, then your people will follow. In the particular case of Ms. Acosta, when people hear that here is a PAO chief, an undersecretary, who refuses to have vaccination and continue to be physically present in her office, that is a slap in the face of the government, in the campaign of the government to have more people vaccinated. In fact, if the records will show, Karen, that we have one of the lowest vaccination rates in our region. We have only 54%. China.
Okay. So before you continue, first, before we go to the low vaccination rates, I wanted to ask you, Attorney Acosta rightly cited Republic Act 11525, which states that vaccine cards shall not be considered an additional mandatory requirement for educational, employment, and other similar government transaction purposes. That's under the law. So she is citing something quite valid here in terms of the no vax, no ride policy, where they're asking for vaccination cards before you ride a bus, a public transport. What do you think of that, Senator?
I think that she is wrong.
Okay.
As a government official, as an undersecretary, she should follow policies of government. It cannot be denied that the policy of government is to protect public health, general health, and to prevent its spread. And even if I'm in the position, I've been critical of the way the campaign has been conducted, but I certainly support the policy that we should exert every effort to prevent this illness from spreading. And the attitude of PAO Chief Acosta certainly does not augur well for the government campaign to convince people to vaccinate. Whether or not there's a legal basis to me is beside the point.
Okay. So
the issue is whether or not Acosta, as a high government official, should follow government policies.
So in other words, it's more of by example.
It's an example because it goes into the credibility of the government in convincing our people to vaccinate.
Okay. Are you for mandatory vaccination, Senator Drilon, as a matter of principle, given where we are today in the world? There are countries, sectors considering mandatory vaccination. Should the Philippines already be open to certain sectors wherein vaccination should be mandatory?
Well, in the United States, for the last 75 years, or over 100 years, there has been a debate. There was a law that mandated vaccination, and it was sustained by the Supreme Court. But the journals would tell us that before we go into a mandatory mandate, a vaccination mandate, first it must be in proportion to the risk involved.
Okay.
Second, there must be a precedent wherein the measures adopted has failed to contain the ailment. There must be access to the...
And there is supply. We have, I think, 100 million vaccines in the country now. So there is supply.
There is supply, but why do we have a very low vaccination rate? 54%, among the lowest in the world.
Why do you think, Senator?
Why? Part of that, Karen, is vaccine hesitancy. Okay. I repeat, yes, we have enough supply. Maybe there can be issues on the distribution, on the logistics, but certainly a major factor in the low vaccination rate is the hesitance of the people to have themselves vaccinated. And the attitude of Acosta does not help any.
I'm curious, do you believe the likes of Attorney Persida Acosta being that vocal against vaccination per se, saying she's unvaccinated, contribute to vaccine hesitancy?
Yes, because she's a government official.
Okay.
If she cannot defend the policies of this administration, she should leave her post. And that is, I'm not even asking for that. I am just saying, protect your fellow workers in the PAO. Do not physically report for work. If you don't want to be vaccinated, then you should, as practiced in some jurisdictions, have at your own expense daily tests before you come in, so that you're negative, so that you can protect your fellow workers. I have to verify this, but somebody informed me that she does that, and I hope that this is not true, that PAO Acosta does not even allow work through the internet and telecommunications. So I have to verify that. But certainly, I would go back to the issue. Yes, there are some debates as to whether vaccine can be mandated. Certainly, there is no law at this point. But the issue is not... Let me finish. Okay. The issue is not the legality or illegality of the mandate. The issue is Acosta being an undersecretary rank, sub-cabinet member, will not follow and pursue government policies. Is that correct? Especially that she endangers her fellow workers in government?
Now, would you support a law, Senator Drilon, on mandatory vaccination for certain sectors?
As a lawyer, I am open to a debate on that. As I said, this is not settled worldwide. There are jurisdictions which, although democracies are reluctant to impose this. There are jurisdictions in the United States, a number of states have imposed vaccine mandates. So this is an open question. In other words, when would you allow compulsion in this vaccination? So I am open to it. In other words, as a lawyer, I will rely on expert advice from the medical field.
Okay. And you did cite, just for the record, for those watching us today, you did cite that the U.S. Supreme Court upheld a compulsory vaccination order against smallpox in 1905.
That's correct.
That's number one, you cited that. And you also cited another case in 1922 where parents of an unvaccinated child were excluded from school for violating the equal protection and due process clauses. So in other words, the debate on is unvaccination discriminatory has been going on, but it's been upheld by law in the U.S. Supreme Court several times.
That's correct. And in other jurisdictions, it's even harsher insofar as penalties for refusing to follow the vaccine mandate. So it is in the United States, there is precedent for this. And in fact, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has ruled that employers have the right to refuse employees who are not vaccinated. Because, and you put this in the context of our health providers, the hospitals. If you allow one who is not vaccinated to work and continue working in health facilities, it is difficult to imagine what can happen.
And this is an important question because number one, those running for elections or even re-election can't really answer this mandatory vaccination directly. But since you're not running, you're more upfront about it. It seems to be such a divisive issue that those running for elections, every time I ask them, are actually quite scared to answer or make a stand on it. Yes.
I'm not scared. First, I stand on the basis of what I believe is right for our people. And that's why I said, I'm willing to listen to medical science and debate on this. From the point of view of the law, it would appear that there are precedents in the most democratic countries like in the United States, in France, and many states in Europe, insofar as vaccine mandate is concerned. But while there is no vaccine mandate, I think it is the duty of the Acostas of this world, being in government office, to follow government policy.
Okay. Number two, you support the no vax, no ride policy? You support that?
There is the right now, that is debatable, but the matter of police power, it can be sustained, and at the very least, it cannot be said that it is absolutely baseless. The police power of the state can be invoked and to sustain this policy of no vax, no ride on the part of the government.
Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about number one. You were talking about the Philippines lagging behind its regional peers in terms of vaccination. And the World Bank actually released a report saying the slow pace and low rate of vaccination, this is regarding the Philippines, compared to its neighbors, may be to blame for the spread of Omicron variant in the Philippines. So that's the World Bank. What are the gaps? What isn't the government doing, considering we do have the supply?
Well, we can just try to put in what we believe in. For example, as I said, vaccine hesitancy is one. Because government claims that there are enough for supplies. So why is there vaccine hesitancy? Why is there low vaccine rates? Certainly, some question can be raised about the availability, especially in the rural areas, Karen. Now, in the provinces, access to the vaccines can be cited as an issue why it is not available to everybody. And of course, as I would keep on repeating, takot yung mga tao eh. You have to keep on doing and be patient with educational campaigns that this is what we need in order that we can protect our health. And Karen, let me emphasize that unless you have the so-called herd immunity, everybody continues to be exposed. That is why medical science tells us that we need herd immunity, and that was the objective of the government, to achieve 70% of our of the population, or the 70% to be vaccinated. And yet today we are only at 54, and we're already 2 years into this pandemic. Why?
So palagay nyo.
So that's why we'll do everything. The government should be doing everything in order to increase this very low rate of 54%.
So you have China now at 90% vaccination rate as of last week, Singapore at 89%, South Korea at 87%, Australia, Japan, and Vietnam at 80%. Practically speaking, what are you seeing in terms of strategies that we aren't doing or that make it more complicated to be vaccinated? I mean, is it because, we just started walk-ins recently, right? In the past, you'd have to register, wait for a text. It takes a while too. So what do you think, Senator, could be new measures that would help increase the rate?
I'm no expert.
Incentives? Incentives?
Yes, all of the above will help increasing our vaccination rate. And the credibility of this government. And that is where I keep on highlighting. The credibility of this government in enforcing or encouraging people to go on vaccination is a very critical factor. Remember, we are just coming out of that Unvaccinated fiasco, where vaccination was raised as an issue on the loss of lives. That is pending before the courts. So I don't want to comment, and I'm not competent to comment on that. Okay. But certainly that contributed to vaccine hesitancy. And who led that campaign? Ms. Acosta. This contributes, yes.
So you are saying that she led the Unvaccinated campaign, which actually contributed to hesitancy, and now she's even declaring she's unvaccinated. So clearly government should take action.
Yes.
Because of also the
historical... Let me make it clear. She believed she was doing her job in the Unvaccinated fiasco, and I give her to that. But the publicity that it generated is something else. You know, certainly, I will repeat, I can probably support her if she asserts that I was doing my job, fine. But the way it was conducted, the publicity that it generated, it cannot be denied as having contributed to the vaccine hesitancy, which up to now we noted that the vaccine hesitancy is a major factor in our very low vaccination rate if we have enough supplies, as the government claims.
Okay. All right. Moving forward, you have several local government units, city councils that have come up with measures, quite stringent measures, already limiting the movement of the unvaccinated. And let's talk about Iloilo because, of course, that's where you're from. So the Iloilo City Council unanimously approved a COVID-19 ordinance also imposing stringent restrictions on movement and access to services of unvaccinated people. Now, you have different groups in the city, and of course, even in several cities who have imposed it here. They see this as a violation of individual rights. So let's talk about that. Wala ngang mandatory vaccination pero idinadaan naman sa ibang paraan. Iipitin ka na kapag hindi ka bakunado, hindi ka makalabas, hindi mo to pwedeng gawin, hindi ganon. So in a way, it's inducing you in some mandatory form to be vaccinated. Do you support that, Senator? What about Iloilo specifically?
You know, Karen, the debates, the discussion that we have had in the last 30 minutes would be certainly applicable to the issue of the ordinance in Iloilo. And this is a good test. There are groups that would oppose this. Those who feel that there is something unconstitutional about this. On the other hand, the city will assert that we have the duty to protect our people. And these are the measures that we are doing in order to protect our people. So this is a classic clash of personal liberties versus police power of the state.
What do you think? Because the Iloilo ordinance, I think it's still awaiting the signature of Mayor Gerino. I don't know the latest, but it's so far it's the boldest, one of the boldest I've seen. And look, private establishments may also prohibit, they can turn down unvaccinated people from entering their premises. Which really be argued as already discriminatory against unvaccinated.
So far as private establishments are concerned, they have the right to exclude people who they feel can pose danger to their establishment. A restaurant, for example, to me, without any need for a law, can exclude customers who would be unvaccinated because of the potential that they can contaminate the other customers in the restaurant. And if you do not do that, you expose the restaurant owners to a case for damages, for negligence, for failing to exercise due care and diligence in protecting the health of the people who enter their establishments. So insofar as private establishments are concerned, I can support that proposition. The issue, it is more complicated when it comes to publicly mandated vaccine mandates. Of course, those who are opposed to vaccines will argue that it's better that you have a mandate because these are promulgated by the duly elected representatives of the people. So, maybe out of exasperation, Mayor Jerry Treñas have taken the position or have encouraged this kind of a debate, and let's see where it will end. Because as we said, this is an open question, not only in Iloilo, not only in the Philippines, but worldwide.
Yeah, I'm curious. Here's also a worldwide, a global concern. Do you believe private companies have the right to terminate a worker or an employee if the employee is an unvaxxer? You know what I mean? Really a believer that, I will not get vaccinated, even if walang medical reasons for me not to get vaccinated. Hindi lang ko naniniwala at ayoko. Do you believe that private companies should be given the right to terminate workers who refuse to be vaccinated?
I will not go to that extent.
Okay.
That they have the right to terminate. But certainly I can support a proposition that employers will not allow the employees who are not vaccinated to go to work, provided there are facilities right there in the premises which will administer the vaccines to these employees, and if they refuse to avail of these vaccines, then again consistent with the principle of your duty to protect the health not only of the particular employee concerned, but of all your employees, you can refuse entry. Now, of course, that is why I am not prepared to say it's a valid ground for termination. No, I am not saying that, but certainly not to allow the employees to go into the premises is something that can be sustained, especially with the advances in technology, where you can do your work as we are doing our interview now through.
I'm curious. Just before we go into a quick break, we'll be talking about the pending bills in both houses after this. I wanted to ask you the argument that don't both the unvaccinated and the vaccinated get the virus and spread the virus? Kumbaga, ang tanong ng ilan, ba't sinisisi lang sa unvaccinated yung pagkalat ng COVID? Kahit na bakunado ka, pwede ka rin daw magkalat ng COVID. Actually, the vaccine protects you more than anything, right?
Yes, and if you get the ailment, you're a burden to society, and therefore it's part of the state's power to and duty to protect the general public, to protect you from yourself from being a burden to society. And being a burden includes not only protecting your health, but also protecting the health of others with this contagious ailment.
Last question on this. You were once Justice Secretary. Could the DOJ suspend someone like Attorney Persida Acosta at this point for statements that she's been making?
They cannot suspend her. She is a presidential appointee.
All right, so they cannot.
She cannot. They cannot. Only the president can do that.
Okay. All right. Anything you wanted to add just on this issue, which is the last? Doesn't this affect the poor the most? The argument that it is anti-poor and oppressive. Kasi kung mayaman ka, hindi ka bakunado, may sarili kang sasakyan, hindi ka kailangan magpaliwanag kanino man. Pero kung mahirap ka, sir, kailangan mo sumakay ng bus. So doesn't this really oppress the poor?
That is why the government must not stop in looking for alternatives. In fact, one of the factors that we should consider before we have a vaccine mandate is the precedent that is available. Has the government done enough to preserve or protect the health of our people before going into vaccine mandates? For example, in this particular case, the issue of enforceability of the mandate on public transport is a very real question. How do you propose to enforce this? And
kailangan araw-araw ka mag-check, di ba, Senator?
Yeah. It's really impractical. So, and that's why it cannot be enforced. There is a question on the enforceability. There is a question on the context. This government is already criticized as being as disregarding human rights, regularly. Now, therefore, in this context, the credibility of the no vax, no ride policy comes to the fore. Ayaw po maniwala ang taong bayan dahilan po sa kanilang naranasan sa mga nakaraang taon na talagang nilalabag ang karapatang pangtao. Kaya this goes into the credibility of this campaign.
Okay. And my last question, pangabol na lang on this. Let's go back a bit to Iloilo. And you have other cities now in NCR that have come up with strict ordinances also. Is it legal for LGUs to pass ordinances like this that may be perceived as already stepping on the individual rights of people?
The right of the national government under its police powers to protect the general welfare, including the health of the people, is as much applicable to the LGUs as the national government. I am not saying that this is that at this stage that it is valid. What I am saying at this stage is there is that power, whether or not it is reasonably exercised, and I emphasize it. Reasonable exercise of that police power would determine whether or not your mandate is valid or not. But Karen, yes, these are, as you may have read, this is an issue which is not settled worldwide. Even the most sophisticated and established democracies of this world, this issue is something that has not been settled. We can cite the 1905 case in the United States as a basis. On the other hand, the proponents or the opponents would cite also the Bill of Rights, the right, the liberties that is guaranteed by the Constitution. So it's a classic class of interest, the interest to protect public health and the individual freedoms. These are these two constitutional rights and duties would have to be resolved by the courts. And yeah, I encourage those who would oppose this to go to the Supreme Court and have this settled once and for all.
But one thing is clear is you do support the police powers of the state. That's one thing in this interview. You've really...
The police power is enshrined in our Constitution. It is not only my view, but that is what the Constitution provides, not only in the Philippines, but in all democracies around the world.
Okay.